Good evening. Dear Vlerick Alumni, dear guests, welcome to our debate on international versus national career paths. In my previous life, I often had to search internationally for people that hold a specific expertise or management skill, no matter which country they came from. On one of those missions, I contacted a man with exactly the right background that we needed in Germany. His response to my question to take up a very exciting mission based in Belgium was, you have to see this was on the phone at that time, Belgien, sind Sie krank, ja? So, or in plain English, coming to work in Belgium, are you crazy or what? So that was a definite no-go. There I was with my hurt feelings. Belgium is a great place to work. I even know German people who work and live here, yes. Just for the sake of the story. Is Belgium in the top 5 dream countries for expats? Not so. According to Internations, a worldwide expat organization, they conducted a survey with some 14,000 respondents throughout more than 60 countries. In the overall rating, Belgium came out 29th out of 61 countries. One of the reasons, and I'm not joking, for this low rate, the weather and the climate. We've witnessed that. But there is one bright point. We come in third on the quality of our education. But so far for the trivial information. Let's go to the serious part of the debate and give a warm welcome to our guest speakers, who will give you a profound view on the subject out of their own experience and from the companies they work for. Ms. Anette Böhm, Senior General Manager Corporate HR at KBC. Mr. Bernard Escoyez, Vice President Human Resources Business Partners Europe at Coca-Cola Enterprises. And Mr. Bart Wille, Chief HR Officer with Bekaert. Thank you very much for joining this discussion. And let me also welcome our own Professor Dirk Buyens, who will guide and moderate the debate. Dirk, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Here. That was a nice story. In an academic environment, 29 and 61 is still passing, you know. Good, ladies and gents, welcome to this evening. The introduction is given, so we can start right away. What we would like to do, we have our distinguished panelists, and we would like to give them just 5 minutes to represent their company so that at least we kind of understand where they do come from, what they currently are doing, in which kind of a context. Later on, we come up with the question marks. And it's my honor to, first of all, present our first panelist, Mrs. Anette Böhm. She currently, as he just mentioned, is Senior General Manager Corporate HR at KBC Bank and Insurance. Let me just tell you that she finished her master's a long time ago at the Beroepsakademie in Mannheim. Then later on, she became, first job was HR, or one of the first jobs was a HR Director Support for Europe, Middle East and Africa for Oracle. Later on, she moved on to AGFA as a Global HR Director. Later on, she became the VP HR for Belgacom, Corporate HR Director of Proximus. On top of that, she became the member of the board of directors of SD Works the Netherlands and general manager of SD Works Germany. But currently, she's at KBC. Give her a warm hand. Annette, the floor is yours.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to be here tonight, and I would also like to introduce myself as the German that is working and living in Belgium. Yeah? And I can tell you there are good things about Belgium. Perhaps the weather is not the best thing, but we can talk about what is good about Belgium and why it is attractive to be here as a German later on. What I will do is I will give you an introduction about who we are at KBC. I guess that most of you know KBC, and I hope that most of you are clients at KBC, but we can also discuss this later on if you wish. So let me perhaps just give some insights about KBC. I call it KBC at a glance because in fact I will only speak a few minutes. And perhaps we can have the first slide. What I would like you to know about KBC is that we are not only a bank insurance company working in Belgium. I think we are quite famous here in Belgium, but we have pretty big organizations also outside of Belgium. We used to be even more international, but as you know, when the crisis hit the financial sector, we also asked for government money, and in order to get the money, we were also asked to divest some of our entities in our foreign countries. This is important for you to know because it will most probably come up later on, and I will talk a little bit about the problems that this created for us, because we employed quite a lot of people at an international basis, but from the perspective that we had to also cut back on the international basis, we were facing some challenges that I think will be also important to explore later on. Yeah? What is important, we have big organizations still in many countries. We have 10,000 employees in the Czech Republic. We have about 4,000 people in Hungary and in Slovakia. We have 2,000 people in Bulgaria, and we have 1,000 employees in Ireland. I think this is important to know because all the countries that we have a quite substantial size. Yeah? What you see also on this slide, and this is the last thing that I would like to point out on this slide, is that we have in total 36,000 employees working for us. So then let's talk a little bit about the KBC strategy. We had an Investors Day in June where we announced a new strategy. In fact, as most of the bank insurance companies, we look forward into the future, and we see quite a lot of challenges coming up to us. We see the need of the financial industry to really invest a little bit more into digitalization. This is one of the challenges that we face. KBC wants to do so, but at the same time strengthen also the bank insurance model, because we really think that this is one of the strengths that we have and that the competitors do not have. So in fact, this is our differentiator. We will mainly focus on SME clients, mid-cap clients, and of course our retail network, which is very important for us. And we will do so by really making sure that we have also a quiet, solid financial base. Yeah? What is important for you to know is that we will strengthen our geographic footprint, but we will not go and seek new adventures in foreign countries. We will rather look into the countries we currently have and invest into opportunities if they arise by taking over competitors in the markets. Yeah? So this is a little bit what I wanted to say. What is also important on this slide is the right side. It's our values that we adhere to. It's the Pearl values. So in fact, we are also a company that wants to stand for performance, empowerment, accountability, responsiveness, and local embeddedness. And I will most probably come back to this point later on.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anette, please take a seat over here if you want to. Yep, thank you. Good. This was our first short presentation. We move on with Bernard Escoyez. Bernard Escoyez started actually his career at l'Université Catholique de Louvain. He's a lawyer, as we could say. Yeah. And indeed, he worked first of all at the Associate Kartuivels, Nolf, Terlinde and Vinsot as a lawyer. Later on, he was active at Corelio, legal director, Mediabel entities, and HR director of Éditions de l'Avenir. Finally, he ended up at Coca-Cola, and I just recently heard that that is about 12 years ago, and in those 12 years, he had 12 different jobs. Give him a warm hand. Bernard, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, basically, I had six different jobs in 12 years. Needless to present what Coca-Cola is about. You find basically Coca-Cola everywhere, even or Coca-Cola products, even under my desk, and even on your tables, because Chaudfontaine is also one of our brands. So Coca-Cola is some kind of a complex reality. We can maybe click on the next slide. And it's a complex reality because we are in fact a network of companies. Everybody knows the Coca-Cola company. Coca-Cola company is creating our products, doing their research and development. They are managing our brands, and they are basically doing the consumer marketing. And they have built their distribution network on a network of bottlers, what you call bottlers, who are doing, in fact, I would say, all the operational activities from production to the distribution and the sale of our products. To give you just a snapshot of the size of both companies, in Belgium you would have almost 80% working for 80 people working for Coca-Cola, for the Coca-Cola company, whereas we have 2,500 associates in Belgium working for Coca-Cola Enterprises. And so Coca-Cola Enterprise will do also the customer marketing and the shopper marketing. We are two completely different separate entities, listed separately at the New York Stock Exchange. No relationship between the two from, I would say, a shareholder perspective. So that's the way that we are operating. Maybe on the next slide, we have a very broad range of portfolio. Of course, everybody knows Coca-Cola, but as you can see, these are, well, I would say a number of the products that you are putting on the market. Of course, mainly brands from the Coca-Cola company. Coca-Cola, Sprite, Fanta, Minute Maid, Chaudfontaine, as I was alluding to. We are also distributing, as Coca-Cola Enterprises, a number of brands owned by third-party franchisors. And a good example of that would be Capri-Sun, for instance. So this is not absolutely complete because our new initiatives that we are currently launching on the market are not yet on there, but I'm absolutely sure that you will be delighted to experience the experience of drinking a Coke live. So our Coca-Cola product with stevia, when we'll be launching that in the month of January. A lot of excitement upcoming. Maybe on the next slide. So Coca-Cola Enterprises is, in fact, when we are looking at the bottling operations, we are the bottler of, we are active in 7 countries, in all located in Western Europe. Before that, and that's, there are always some kind of moving parts in the bottling system. We had also, until 2010, the North America. So USA and Canada. Currently, our perimeter is limited to seven countries, being the Benelux countries, Norway, Sweden, GB, and France. We have also big operations in Bulgaria, where we have put, I would say, our shared services. And a lot of transactional activities are being done from Bulgaria, which poses also, from an HR standpoint, a number of challenges, notably the one of creating an employee value proposition for these people. More than $8 billion revenue, 30 billion services, servings annually to 170 million consumers, 17 manufacturing facilities, and approximately a bit more than 12,000 employees across Europe. We are still based in Atlanta, where we do have our headquarters and a couple of people working there, 200 approximately. This is, I would say, our roadmap, our operating framework. One thing maybe to notice that everything that we are doing, we're putting our customers in the center of our activities. We know that we cannot win without making our customers winners. So very central. A number of values on which we can, we base everything we want to do. Being accountable, customer focused, central, as I told you, team driven. Very important value from an HR perspective, of course. So many thanks.
Thank you. You're welcome. Last but not least, Bart Wille is also with us tonight. He's the Chief HR Officer at Bekaert Group. Going quickly over his CV, Bart started his career at the University of Antwerp, meaning he obtained there his master's degree in applied economics, and then later on went working for the Unilever organization. I won't mention all the titles he had at Unilever, but let me just mention the places. First he was in Belgium, then he was in Asia, Latin, Brazil, once again back in Belgium, then once again in Latin America, once again Latin America. And finally, he currently, or before that, he became the Group Human Resource Director of Puratos after he left Unilever as Senior Vice President, Human Resources for Global Foods. Currently, he moved from one fast-moving to another fast-moving, Bekaert. The floor is yours, Mr. Bart Wille.
Is it? Oh, yeah. Well, that's what happens with microphones. They can be on mute. So I did say good evening to you all. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to be able to talk about the expatriate and international management of Bekaert. I wanted very briefly to tell you some highlights about Bekaert. Bekaert will next year celebrate its 135th anniversary. We started in 1880. And in fact, in a few years from now, we will celebrate our 100th anniversary of being a multinational company. Because immediately after the First World War, Bekaert moved outside the Belgian borders, first into Europe, later into the Americas, and recently, in the last 20 years, quite massively into Asia. Today, we have a global manufacturing platform. We have factories in about 40 countries, and we serve customers in more than 120 countries all over the world. With 27,000 people who are part of the Bekaert extended family today. I've given on the charts there a view on what are the highlights of our strategy. Consistent with our better together aspiration. Better together is something which for Bekaert is very important. It comes from a partnership desire with customers, and it's something we also apply very much internally. So in line with that aspiration, we want to be the preferred supplier of steel wire and steel wire products and solutions to our customers by delivering value to customers. And that is something we've learned from companies like Coca-Cola to put the customer at the heart of what we are doing. We used to be a company which was product out. We were very proud of being able to produce something, and then we were looking for a customer also. We've learned our lesson, and we are looking at what the customer wants, and we are trying to produce that. So maybe I can go to the next slide. These are, in fact, our core competences. On the top of the slide, you see a drawing of the very first product Bekaert ever produced with the signature of the founder below it. Our capability is to produce very, very fine and very strong wires in all types of applications and to put coatings on these. And with that business, we are present, as you can see, worldwide. The presence is almost equally balanced between the four continents where we are active. A quarter in Europe, a little bit less than a quarter in Asia Pacific, a little bit more than 1/3 of our business is taking place in Latin America, and the remainder in North America. And on the next chart, you will see that we are producing for almost all industries. We serve the automotive industry, the construction industry. Energy is an important and growing sector of customers for us. Equipment industry, machinery, and so. There's quite a lot of Bekaert products in your home. Next time you open a bottle of champagne, there's 90% chance that it's a Bekaert wire, which is around the cork. We also still serve agricultural markets, which is in fact our origin with barbed wire, with which we were fencing the Belgian farmlands. That be it.
Let's get started. And Bernard, if I may start with you, if you don't mind. We all invited you because you have something with national, but also with international careers. Would you still remember when you first went international, and how come you decided? We know that careers happen by hazard, but what made you decide to go international?
Well, I think it was just the opportunity that I had at that moment in time. I was, I had the opportunity to go to the Netherlands, so it was not very exotic.
That's what we call international in Belgium. You know?
Yeah, precisely. No, clearly I wanted to join the CC or the Coca-Cola group without knowing how the components were working. And quite honestly, it's just the opportunity that I had at some moment in time to take a position which was more interesting because I was getting a bit bored in Belgium in the role that I had. That was for me the opening to move into to have first international experience.
Okay. Bart, how was it in your case?
My first international experience was working in Japan, actually, which was not on your CV. It was when I was still a student that I went to do an internship as a student in Japan for a number of months. And already then I was absolutely certain that I would spend a large part of my career internationally. I joined Unilever with the sole intention to seek international opportunities. And to see the world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Was that the idea that made you come to Belgium, to see the world, Anette?
No, not really. And to be honest, it was not a deliberate choice to come to Belgium. I think, as Geert rightly said, Belgium was very low on my list. I came here because, in fact, I fell in love with Belgium, and this is what made me come here. What I must say, I regret it after some time because I gave up a really good job in Germany, and where I learned it also the hard way that it's not really evident to follow someone who has an international career as only the spouse. And I think this is something that we will have to talk about later on.
Okay, I'll keep it in mind. Thank you. Bart, if I may come back to you, and I just want to check if you look now at currently your organizations, and the topic of tonight is national versus international.
Yes.
Are they treated differently, the nationals versus the international careers, I would say? Let's not look at people so far.
Not willingly. There is not something like a policy which says somebody who's worked internationally will be treated differently. But the reality is that when you look at career paths, when you look at the track record of people who have had an international experience, that it is different from people who have not worked outside the borders of a certain country. And yes, working internationally is not always being expatriated with the family and everything. Mm-hmm. We will talk about that. Yeah. But I think that we see that if you really want to make it to the top in the organization, that having worked internationally in one or another way is definitely a plus.
Okay. Is that the same at Coca-Cola?
Yes, but the willingness is more expressed. And so clearly we do, in the way that we are managing our talent, we have a number of rules, and one of these rules are that if you want to be considered as having a high potential, you need to declare that you are mobile. And mobile does mean that you need to be willing to relocate when the opportunity appears. That doesn't mean that you need to have an international experience in order to progress your career, but at least you need to show that commitment of being prepared to move abroad. Now, what we are seeing, though, is that for certain positions within the company, I'm really speaking about the positions of country directors, of general managers, it is clear that without a foreign experience, you will not get there. And so it's an unwritten rule, but it's a real rule that exists. And if you're looking, we have now 3 main business units. If you look at the people who are there, the guy running the French business unit is a Belgian. The guy running the Northern Europe business unit, so I would say the Benelux countries and then Sweden and Norway, is a Brit. And the guy who is running GB, his name is Leendert de Hollander, and I do not need to tell you from where he is.
Rightly so. Thank you. Annette, KBC is a little bit different, isn't it?
Yes, KBC is different. I would say that we used to have quite a lot of international careers, and we still see international careers as quite an asset. But as I said before, as we had to diversify quite some countries, we also see the limits of the system. We currently really see that especially the expatriate status is coming under pressure. We have a lot of people who really chose for an international career. We even had advertisements many years ago where we said, come to join KBC in order to not come back, but to stay internationally. This is now coming to its limits, and we see the pressure we put on our employees who have been abroad for a long time, but that we now ask to come back, and we have really asked them to live the lives of expatriates with all consequences for the family. And this is, I think, the reason why we now look differently at the careers. We think that we can also give international careers to people without necessarily sending them internationally for a long time, but to give them the exposure that we for sure do not want to miss, because in fact I think we see the good things about international careers and what it can add to a company, but we do not really want to take all the consequences, the negative consequences, if you have too many people that you force at a certain point in time to come back.
Right. And we'll come back on those negative points in a minute. But let me just dig in a little bit further in that international career. If you look at your careers, but also within the organization, do you see some evolution in there? Because on the one hand, we see many organizations saying it's very important. Yet on the other hand, we also see the kind of picture of the so-called expat status with everything linked to that, that has become somewhat slimmer in many organizations. Some even talking about the so-called international career being the one-way ticket. You get a ticket to fly out, but you don't get a ticket to come back, meaning your legal status even changes. That is the case already in your countries, or not yet?
There is
Bart?
definitely an evolution in the way companies are looking at expatriation. When I was first involved with expatriation, which is about 20 years ago at Unilever, I was in charge of talent management for a region for Central Asia, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. And we were sending people to India without a pre-visit, because the philosophy was, if you go on a pre-visit to India, you will arrive there tired and you will have a bad impression, and after 3 days you will come back and you will say, I don't want to go to India. Whereas we know from experience that once you're there for a week or 2 weeks, you will get through it and you will like it. So we were much more paternalistic as a company. We were saying, we will regulate this for you, we will organize things for you, and by the way, you could only go to India if you were legally married. You could not go with a partner with who you did not have a marital status, because that was creating all kinds of trouble. Today, I think we are, and I think most of the companies are, a lot more flexible, a lot more looking in a creative way for solutions in order to make things happen, to make them possible.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. How's it at Coca-Cola?
Yeah, no, I think, we feel, I completely agree with the fact that companies are more and more flexible in the way that they approach international careers. And the evolution that we are seeing now is that certainly with the types of technology that we put in place, working remotely even from your country where your role is located, starts to be possible. And what we see more and more is the creation of what I'm calling backpack roles, being in fact professional commuters, working in one country but living in another one, and doing that on a quite flexible basis. There's for sure a cost component linked to that. There's also a comp and ben component linked to that, because coming back to your home country poses a number of challenges that you can avoid in having these flexible ways of working.
Right. We quite often say once we send people out, it's very difficult to get them back. Not only for financial reasons, but also because of the so-called culture shock and also of the habits and what they got used to wherever they were in the world. Would you agree on that, Annette?
I think what we see is that it's mainly the partners that suffer the most. What we see when we have discussions with our expatriates and we want to bring them back, that it's mainly the partners and the kids that start complaining, because in fact they are used to a certain lifestyle and they do not want to miss the lifestyle, which I also can understand from the perspective of having given up my career at a certain point in time to follow my husband. I think it's not evident. You've given everything up, you follow somebody, and then you have to go back to your normal life with not the pleasant status of being an expatriate anymore, which creates problems.
Right. Bart, you moved back and forth. Was it because of your spouse asking you to come back, or what was the reason behind it?
No. It was well. It was. I've had the chance of having, and still have the chance of having, a spouse who is very much accommodating and supportive for this. And I think that is extremely important. When you want to live an international career, you need to find a way to do this in harmony with your family. We moved to the UK and moved on to Brazil without a pre-visit, by the way. My wife had never been in Brazil the day we arrived over there. And we arrived and felt the culture shock, as you just say. But the culture shock was much bigger on coming back. A few years later, you come back to your home country and you are full of enthusiasm about everything you've lived, about everything you've seen, about the experiences you've had. You've changed because of an expatriation. And it's disappointing to see that the world around you has not changed in the same way. And that, in fact, people aren't really interested. So that creates what is called the reverse culture shock, which is clearly there and which is something I think we as companies need to manage, need to accompany people in order to help them to go through that.
All right. We're talking more and more about the so-called dual careers nowadays. People want to make careers both. You've been through that experience moving out. Dual career, can both people move out? Do we need deals like I follow you for 5 years and then you follow me for 5 years? What is the way to go with it? Bernard, and maybe tell first how you did it, because you succeeded so far too.
How I did it. First of all, I never lived with my I never had to move with my family abroad.
Okay.
And because our operations are only in Europe, I've always managed to have this kind of backpack roles, which poses also I would say another question from I would say in the family life, because at some moment in time when you're coming back, you need to refine your to find your place back in the family, right. Which pose, and coming back is then probably the tough moment. Quite honestly, I will not speak about my partner because I really believe that having an international career, you need to have a good partnership together. But my wife doesn't work or has no professional activity, so until now she has been taking care more of the family and the children. So we were not confronted personally with that challenge of dual careers.
Right. But looking at other people in the organization from an HR perspective, does it work? Dual international careers, Annette?
I don't think that, especially if you have kids, that two can have an equal career, yeah, an international career moving out, yeah. And I think this is also what drives us rethinking the whole expatriation idea, because in fact what we felt at KBC was also that we really excluded women from international careers. I think there are only a few women who will be prepared to leave their kids behind in order to move out. Yeah. So in fact, what we said is we cannot do this anymore, and therefore we also want to give women other opportunities to gain international experience. But it means the willingness to travel a lot, but I would not even say on a weekly basis, because I I also doubt whether it needs to be always on a weekly basis. But if you really go back and forth to the countries, you can manage a career. And to be honest, I have a husband myself that travels a lot himself. Yeah, but it means a lot of coordination. But as long as we can both be based in Belgium, it works.
Okay, as long as we stick to the territory.
Exactly, and this is also I think the agreement that we have. Yeah, I think we both know that we will most probably have always to let go certain offers, because in fact this is a choice that you make, and if you say like you both want to have careers, this has limitations.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Bart, how did I deal with it at Bekaert? Because we have plenty of people.
Dual careers,
Yeah.
dual international careers are difficult. Very difficult to handle. They require really a tailor-made attention to looking for tailor-made solutions. And I've seen some cases work well, and I've seen other cases going much more difficult. What you see is that sometimes companies create an opportunity for the partner in order to accommodate, but it always or often leaves a feeling of some dissatisfaction, not entirely what I wanted. So it's very difficult when you start to mix in that. It becomes even more difficult that when you have the two partners working in the same company, and you want to expatriate them. And we invented or kind of created a career of lead careers. Who of the two is now the lead career? Because we need to be very clear, and you almost need to do talent management or have talent management discussions in a trio with the three sitting there, the manager and the couple, because everybody needs to be involved and everybody needs to clearly understand the difficulty which it poses.
But indeed, the example you give, because some companies have it as a policy, we never send somebody out unless the spouse also gets something to do out there, just to make sure that he or she, even if it's would not be the reason why they would like to come back. Would Coca-Cola do something like that, or?
No, and I think that we're not quite good at that. And we see also in our experience that it's clearly well, the family and well, the spouse or the husband that really creates the at some moment in time the trigger to come back to the home country. We have a lot of, I would say a couple of very good examples and compelling examples where the lead was the, I would say, the wife in the in the couple, but also in these cases we see that we really need to take care of what's happening at the with the partner, just in order to make sure it's successful.
Would you all agree then on the fact that we even need to pamper our internationals more than we do today? Because some people would already argue, don't they get enough? Question?
I think you have a responsibility towards your international people, because I think it's a company that had asked them to do a certain mission in a foreign country, and I think it's also the responsibility of the country to follow them up carefully and to make sure that they can have and continue having good careers when they return. So in fact, I think it's a responsibility, and especially also towards the families. Right. Because in fact, what we see, for example, and I think it's a little bit a different perspective than the one that Bernard just described, we had a lot of expatriate moving out when they were single, but they all return as couples, because in fact they got to know their wives in the foreign country, and so in fact often they
ended
get to
up
know
in another
them.
Business then, as KBC.
They often get to know them in the bank, and so in fact they try then to accommodate them when they return to Belgium, which I think gives another perspective, because it means for us tapping into another resource, because we get foreigners in that are really willing to work for us on a local basis, because in fact they wish to make Belgium their new home. which I think is an interesting perspective as well, that companies should explore more, because you have a lot of people that come to a country because they get to know somebody, or they pursue a career at a certain point in time and they want to stay in the country. And I think this is the talent that we should be tapping in a little bit more in the future as well.
Okay, thank you. May I go back to your personal experience? Because you both were talking a minute ago about the so-called cultural shock, yeah? And that indeed the reverse, namely the coming back, is much more of a shock than the going out there. Could you kind of describe a little bit, what is that shock about? What is then so strange about even going to the Netherlands, which as a Belgian should not be that different? But what are the things that you experience then? What makes it so difficult? Why do we call it a shock, into your experience?
I think the shock is there because you arrive in a different cultural environment, and it's often, the shock is often more difficult where you don't expect it. We moved as a family to London, and afterwards we moved to Brazil. And yet we found it a lot easier to settle in Brazil than to settle in London. Because in London, everybody was thinking, well, there's no real shock, so there was no or little help or assistance available. In Brazil, when you arrive as a European in Brazil, all bells and whistles are there to receive you and to accommodate you, and it helps you to go through that shock. So the shock is often there where you don't expect it. And I imagine that Bernard must have felt something similar in working in the Netherlands. I hope there are not too many Dutch people.
They probably have the same
audience,
tonight being here. Bernard.
Yeah, no, I've been working in the Netherlands. I'm working in GB currently in London. Indeed, I would say, well, the cultural shock is the first thing is that you need to explain the Belgian complexity, which is a cultural shock in itself. But what you're telling me is completely true. Certainly in an American company, people do not see, I would say, and we are still an American company, that there are differences between countries in Europe. And so, indeed, there is no real... There are some programs to get acquainted to the culture and induction also from a cultural standpoint, also for the spouses and the husbands. But indeed, the problem tends to be negated a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. But was it difficult? For me, it was not really difficult to get adapted, because there is something like a Coca-Cola culture, which is very strong, which is a very strong corporate culture, and which really helps to have the similar codes and the similar ways of thinking.
Okay, thank you. Annette, do you have to go to Germany once in a while to kind of get at ease again?
I still like returning to Germany, and I do quite often. But I think it's the same for me. When I go back and I stay there for a few days, then I go like, this is not my country anymore, and I also want to go back to Belgium then. So in fact, I think I would say my home is where my family is, and it does not matter where it is. If it's Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, it doesn't matter.
Right. We quite often think about those things in a rational way, but people say, listen and see how they educate their kids, because that's how they feel about it. What is the biggest advice you give to your own kids nowadays? And depending on their ages, they might be still young, or but do you want them to be out there?
Absolutely.
Bart?
Absolutely. I think more than before, more than our generation, the generation of our kids will be confronted with a global world in which they have to be able to thrive and to find their way. So I think it is absolutely important that they do find their way independently to accommodate with different cultures, different languages, different environments. So I can't agree more.
They have to, or you stimulate?
They don't have, nobody has to, but our eldest daughter was born in Brazil, and we've probably always cultivated an interest in Brazil, although she lived most of her life in Belgium. But when she turned 18, she decided she wanted to take a gap year And 3 days ago, she left to Brazil to do social work and to do something meaningful for the country with which she feels linked, and in which she feels that she has to discover something and that she can that she can learn from.
Right. Anette?
I would agree very much with Bart, and I think it's not about pushing kids to pursue international interests. I think kids that have grown up in such an environment seek for it itself, because in fact I think they have been exposed to so many cultures, they love it, and so in fact kids will do something with it. I would also not say that my daughter will start an international career herself, but at least she will always have the interest for international exposure. And if she will tell me one day that she wants to go to a foreign country, I will fully support her.
Okay, that's clear. But
yeah, my children have never been exposed to being expats themselves, so that changes. But they see me traveling a lot, and so quite honestly, they are very, very attracted by, and so they are asking on their knees almost to have some kind of expat experience. I think that they're very culturally open. My oldest daughter is studying Chinese while she's doing her her university studies too. So there is probably a kind of opening created by the fact that even if they don't live internationally, they hear a lot about international careers and added value.
But perhaps there's one aspect that I would like to mention as well, because in fact I had a very interesting discussion with one of our CEOs last week. He has always had international careers, and his kids have never ever lived in Belgium. And in fact, he has moved on to different career opportunities in foreign countries each 5 years. What he told me, I think, shook me a little bit, because in fact he said to me like, one of my kids can really deal with it extremely well, but I have a daughter, she is really having problems, because in fact she is very interested in what she calls third culture developments, because she says like, I do not know where my home is, and she's now studying in the UK. He is our CEO in Ireland, and he said, I really struggle, and I sometimes ask myself whether I've really made the right choice, because she seems to have difficulties to define what home is for her, which I think is quite tricky. And I think if I look at us here, we have all decided to give our kids some stability, to at least give them exposure to international things, but we have also chosen to give them some stability in life.
Building on that point, because that's also something we find in the literature, some people say you need a minimum of emotional stability yourself as a human being before you can kind of, in a stable way, go abroad. Because going means always coming back. Would you, from your HR role, sometimes advise people not to go abroad because of that reason? Be it personal, be it their relationship with their spouse, be it the situation with their kids? And could you elaborate a little bit, maybe, Bart?
Yes. I've had a number of cases where I've discouraged people from going internationally. We often try to meet not only the candidate expatriate, but also the spouse or the partner, in order to establish a view of, is this family really ready for this, or is it going to be difficult? And as we were discussing a while ago, the moment of an expatriation is a moment at which the link between the employer and the employee is different than when people are employed in a normal way in their country. You, in one way or another, you do interfere more with the family life, and the family also interferes with what is happening in the business. So I think it is absolutely important to align these two and to understand, and I think it's my role and the role of my team who are involved with this, to really understand, is this family ready for it? How are the children going to deal with this? How are they really going to cope with the challenge which is there?
Okay. How does it go? Yours?
Yeah, clearly that's a debate that we are having with people who are candidates, and we first need to check. And you were referring to check to what extent the whole family is really willing and prepared to have that experience, and is not, sacrificing themselves just to the career of one of the partners. I think that the element that you were putting forward about the stability is really important, and one of the things that we are always, because we know that in a couple tensions can occur when they meet abroad, or that can be exacerbated. And so clearly the stability of the couple is something that we would like, that we try to check discreetly with them, asking the right questions in order to make sure that expatriation could not be the cause of something
Right.
that they would have otherwise having solved.
Yeah, I agree. I think
You would agree?
Yeah, I think this is very much aligned with what we do.
Yeah.
We also try to check as much as possible, because in fact I think to bring somebody back much earlier costs the organization a lot of money and creates also a lot of anxiety.
Right, right. Would you go that far that even at the moment of selection, you would already take into account whether somebody has the potential of going international in your organizations?
Yes.
Because at yours, probably because once you enter that you have to, or might have to.
Clearly, probably not at the entry level, because people start, to make steps abroad. Certainly not in the first years of their careers with us, but certainly for positions where that might be, or for people that we consider being, or taking roles that are roles for people that have potential, we will clearly do that check about mobility.
Okay.
Before we hire.
Yeah.
I fully agree. I think it is important to understand what is the openness and the inclination of a manager to go that extra mile, which an expatriation certainly is. But at the same time, it's also something where, as a company, in the end, for many of the positions, when you recruit for somebody with potential, not only to do a job but to make a career, you want to be reassured that that person will go all the way. When I look in a company like Bekaert, in the top 25%, no, the top 25 of the managers, of the most senior managers in the company, 22 or 23 have worked in at least 3 countries, lived and worked in at least 3 countries. So somewhere, as we said in the beginning, it's not an absolute rule, but you see
set the
that
example
it is
by doing so.
absolutely.
If I join Bekaert, then I
happening,
see that all my top people have been there, so I know which
That's
road
it. Yes.
leads to heaven
Yes.
or close to it. Yeah.
So when you recruit somebody, you look at that.
Yeah. Maybe another thing which is a little bit related to that, we quite often see that sometimes it might go wrong, but not even in the assignment itself, but people might enjoy it. But quite often expats get a little bit isolated in their home countries, meaning they might not be kind of building up or maintaining their network, so to speak. Do you do anything from the organization's perspective so that people are or forced to come back on regular moments, or after some years, like the diplomats, that they have to come back for a while in the country just to make sure that they have their social network here still? Would you have policies like that in your companies? I see you nodding, Anette.
I would say we have something, but it's much more explicit for our senior managers than it is for our lower level expatriates. Yeah. So in fact, we give a lot of opportunities to our top 300 to meet each other and to really maintain good relationships. I would describe KBC as a typical networked organization, so it's very important who you know to get things done. So this is how we play the game. It's easy for the top 300, but it's not as easy for the people working at lower levels. And there we have an explicit service in the HR department that have to make sure that these people stay connected. We make arrangements for them when they come over so that they can see people, because we know that if we don't, we run into problems at the moment that they have to come back because they have no links anymore.
Right. Okay. Bernard? Yeah, sorry.
I was having a reflection that I think that the problem of internal networking within the company tends to be less and less pregnant as you know, as we're moving more and more towards matrix organization that are organized much more, I would say, in international networks.
Yeah.
So meaning that someone being part of a network working in Belgium would probably move to another role, maybe abroad, but will keep his network just because the way that we are trying to organize ourselves.
Right. On the inside, but also on the outside?
Yeah, the outside is a much more complicated issue.
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the challenge is slightly different when you come to talk about intercontinental expatriation than when you talk about expatriation within a continent. There's enough opportunities within Europe for people to stay connected. But people who are really overseas, it's much more of a challenge. It's easier to organize that today than years ago. When I was the other day talking with somebody, his father had been an expatriate for Bekaert in 1949 to Chile. And well, he left with the boat, 3 months in a boat, and then they were off for 5 years. And after all that time, they came back. So the dimension of the alienation was very different.
Much bigger.
And today, it's with all the media which you have, and with travel, it's easy. It's much easier, of course, to stay in touch. But still, it is a challenge. One of the things we do is, first of all, try to work much more actively to limiting the duration of these expatriations. In the past, people left and stayed for 5, 10, 12 years abroad, and then you see that it's extremely difficult to take them out again and to bring them back. What we also do is when people come back on their annual home leave, we are asking them very formally to have a career counseling session with somebody in their home country, so that they keep the contact and that they keep not only a social contact, but a really business contact.
And what is the average duration you would have of those assignments today then?
I think it's still it's between 4 and 5 years, but we are working to bring that slightly down. 4 years is our ideal duration of an expatriation.
Let me maybe just pick in on something you said, and just as kind of an extreme statement, but some companies are not considering Europe anymore as different countries, but say Europe is one continent, like the US. So if you travel within Europe, we consider you just to be a local, and instead of taking your car or your bike, you take your airplane, but that's still local. Really going international is crossing oceans. Would you agree on that?
I think it can work. I used to work for Oracle, and in Oracle it was like this. Yeah, Oracle was not willing to pay for expatriation. So in fact, they said you stay wherever you are, and as long as you are prepared to travel as much as we want you to travel, this is fine for us. To be honest, when I was there and I was in the system, it worked perfectly. Yeah, because in fact you also, of course, can sail around a lot of other problems, pension schemes, etc. Yeah, and this helps, but it has also limitations. And
which you only realized when you came out of the system.
But I think you will not get the full experience of being in a country organization. You fly in and out all the time, and to be honest, it's different if you fly in all the time, fly in and out all the time. And whether you stay there forever, and are part of the country organization.
Yeah. Bernard, would you agree with the statement?
From an external standpoint, or for the standpoint of our American management, that would be clearly the case.
Yeah.
So they need to be a little bit educated to that. But everybody who has had an expat experience within our company says that it's much more easy to be an expat in the US than probably in GB.
Probably being here.
So these are the types of examples that we need to put forward sometimes in order to understand what that may mean.
Short reaction from you, Bart?
About half of our expatriates are technical people. They are running plants. They are in charge of large teams. They need to be with these teams. So it's very difficult to say do that on a commuting basis. And yes, although sometimes we would wish to simplify the system by saying we consider Europe as one big geography and we treat everybody in the same way. The taxman doesn't see it like this, and
Right.
that is the first very practical problem.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you very much so far. I'm now just looking at the audience. I do apologize because this was kind of an old-fashioned setting, because for more than an hour you have been silent. Yeah. Which is abnormal. Yeah. So just making sure that you're gonna say something, may I suggest we have a 1-minute Zoom session, which ends with an M, not with an N. Yeah? That means you just talk to your neighbor, you give some criticism on what you heard, you say what you like, you say what you dislike, and as a result of that, whenever in a minute you get a mic in front of your mouth, you will say something. Yeah? 1 minute, zooming with one another, so we can have a drink over here. Thanks.
Thank you. Yoni Spiro from Generations Recruitment. So we heard that if your top talents and top managers had some international exposure or experience, or it's very much appreciated. The question is whether when someone doesn't accept the international experience, does it limit his possibility to achieve a higher level of the highest level of the organization? Whether you believe as HR that not going abroad is limiting your skills not to become future directors?
That's a clear question. A simple yes or no could be enough.
There is no yes or no on this. I think, or the no is, of course, it would not limit the career if this person is really so good that you don't want to miss that person. Then you accommodate as an organization. However, what you see is that expatriations and international exposures are moments of acceleration of the development of somebody. And you see that, therefore, somebody who is really good, high potential, and takes an expatriation will get faster to the next stage than somebody else who does not have that experience.
Not needed, but it helps.
It helps.
Yeah, I can give you an official and a non-official answer to that question.
That's what we like.
Which one first?
The official question would be yes, if you're not mobile or not prepared to go abroad, if you at some point of time have a good opportunity to develop you in your career and you refuse it because you do not want to go abroad, that may have a career limiting impact in our company. That's for the official part. The non-official part is much more pragmatic than that. And I think that there are two levels. The first level is, it is anyhow career limiting not to be adaptable, I would say. But, and I think that adaptability could be from a geographical standpoint, but also from a function standpoint. So basically, if you're in a company, you're saying, I do not want to go abroad, and I'm absolutely not interested to make a step beyond the boundaries of my own function, this might be limiting. I think also that when we have really very good people, I would say, and if they are adaptable, I would say from a functional perspective, not going abroad, I never seen that as really in practice being career limiting.
Okay. Anette.
And in KBC, we really like people to take their careers in their own hands. And if you ask somebody to take his or her career in her own hands, or his or her own hands, you also have to accept that people make the choice against international careers. And I would very much go into the direction that Bart has been going in to. I think people have to make up for it with something else. And they have to make sure that they show in other activities that they can really accelerate their learning and that they can become better than others. And as long as they do, we really would not limit anybody from a career because of not going international. Because we also think that we will otherwise put people under pressure and make them give up their balance between professional life and private lives, because it has a lot to do also with your private life, if you can go or cannot go.
Is that a clear answer to you? Okay. Then we move on to the next question. Yep. That's the wind.
Thank you. Pierre Gainsbourg from Keyence International. My question is, are all continents or all countries equal in terms of expatriation? I have an example. A very good friend of mine is now working in Congo, and he's going to stay here, there for a period of 5 years as an expat. And he has a career plan then going back in Belgium, but it's sometimes not the case for other people. They have their mission, and then we don't know what's going to happen. So in terms of the place where you're going to work, what's the impact? Is it better to be in this continent or another? What are the outcomes in the end?
Thank you. Anyone who feels?
Yes, I think the outcome depends on what the objective is. So if the objective of the expatriation is to make a step in your career, to develop and to move on to a next step, that is very different than if the objective of your expatriation is to go there to transmit a certain expertise which you have. If the objective is a career developing objective, which I meant to understand, then yes, it's clear that there are countries which will offer faster development opportunities, or I say countries, it's environments which offer a faster development opportunity than others. It all depends on the job you are going to do there, the exposure you have, the environment in which you are, and how much the environment to which you come is relevant for the next step in your career. So I could imagine that if you are working in Europe and the career plan is that not the next step, but the step afterwards, you will go to work in, let's say, the US, that maybe the Congo is not the best intermediate step. So it all depends on where it needs to lead to.
Okay. Anything more to add?
And I think what is also important is what your friend wants to get out of it. Because in fact, I think if he moves to Congo with the vision, I want to come back and make a career in my own company, it's also still different. He might also consider moving on and having a career elsewhere. So in fact, I think it all depends, and there is no right or wrong. I think both the employer as well as the employee himself should think about what do I want to get out of this experience.
You got an advice for your friend? You have an advice for your friend now?
Well, yes, it's quite clear. But also in terms of reputation. Oh, sorry, thank you. Also, in terms of reputation, a statement that I often heard is when you go working in Africa, then you are not adapted anymore to Europe or Western countries. Is that true, in your opinion?
If that was your question, you had to say it.
I think it depends in which business you are and in which career you are. Yeah. You could say so for Latin America. You could say, well, Latin American markets are very different than European or North American markets. You can say so about China. Yet we send our best people to China because that's where the biggest challenges are. So it could be that in the company of your friend that the biggest challenges are in Africa, and that therefore they need to have their best people over there.
Okay. Thank you very much. There you are.
Marco Kroon, ACV International. We're a medium-sized manufacturer of boilers and water heaters, and we have operations and sales outlets in about 12 countries, going from US to China, including Russia. And our corporate policy is we have 0 expats. And as far as we are concerned, we will always have 0 expats. And the theme of tonight, and that was the result of our Zoom session, it was national versus international, but we have only heard about the international part for the time being. So perhaps to bring that a bit into the middle, might have to do with the size of a company, but I would ask you, what would happen to your company if you would have no expats? I personally question extremely the efficiency, or should probably say inefficiency, is what I mean, of expats in many functions, and I have personal experiences with that. About a year ago, I visited a number of factories in Slovakia, one of the countries where KBC is active, and some of them were run by all foreign-owned factories. Yeah? Some were run by local people, some were run by expats. They were both. And the expats did a great job in explaining me that I absolutely needed to put an expat in my factory if I was going to have one there. The only thing that I can tell to you, the most shitty factories that I saw were run by expats, and the best factories that I saw were run by locals. So one question. Secondly, I worked in a Benelux organization, but perhaps a bit different. I don't know Coca-Cola Enterprise so well. I know Coca-Cola, of course, but the enterprise part is less known to me. But we had a big commercial operation in both countries, Belgium and Netherlands. I have only had failures in having Dutch people doing a market job, sales or marketing, or even a project management job in Belgium, or vice versa. It's different from back office or expert people, technical expert people. They are quite international because of their expertise. So when we say international career, expat, that in my understanding, but you mentioned also the backpack. I think it's different. You can have a national career in an international environment. Again, back to my question, would your company be much worse off if you would only have national careers with international exposure?
Well, there are a number of questions and a number of statements in your intervention, and thank you for that. So I'll try to
That was a good speech.
to answer the most easy ones and leave to my colleagues the most difficult ones, of course.
Thank you.
So first of all, I don't think I think it's always dangerous to make rules, and I think that what we need to have is to have the right talent at the right place. So being an expat or a local people doesn't really matter, and we are not saying and taking a point of view that in some positions we should absolutely have an expat, unless we really believe that there is some added value in having some cross-fertilization between countries. But there still need, I think, to be a business case, and the business case can be something about cross-fertilization. And coming back to what Bart was saying, there can be also having an added value in having expats just for their own development. And quite honestly, if you're looking now currently at the labor market, someone who has on his CV an international experience has, I would say, is a little bit more marketable than someone who hasn't. And in the employee value proposition that you're building, offering these kind of career evolutions can really bring an added value and increase the attractiveness of your own company, and attract, and enhance the learning agility. So there are a number of reasons, and very good reasons to have expats at some moment in time. But basic principle is that you need to have the right talent. So on your statement about people from the Netherlands running Belgian operations, I can provide you with a list of very good experience, and a number of Dutchmen having been able to run Belgian operations in our company very successfully. So always difficult, and I think dangerous to make general rules.
Okay. Bart, you like to comment on this?
Were there any difficult questions left?
Would your company do worse if you would not have them? Take
Yes.
just the core theme of it.
Yes.
And why so?
Because I think there is a lot of richness which has been built in Bekaert around the experience which people have had internationally. Now, if the question is, could we do with less expats? Do we have the right balance? I would say no. At a certain moment, 3-4 years ago, we had too many. And we've made, in the past 3-4 years, a correction, very intentionally, to reduce from, we had about 120 expats, we've reduced that to about 80 expats. What did we see? That indeed, in some parts of the business, there was a kind of habit, well, there's an expat who has finished, and the next expat will come. No, that can't be. I think the first job which every expat has to do, and by the way, which every manager has to do, is to make sure that they prepare their successor. And from an expat, we expect that he will try to prepare a local successor. That's not always possible. That's not always possible within the time frame which is there. Sometimes you need more time, or it's not always desirable because in some cases you just want that international exposure and cross-fertilization. But in other cases, and in quite a lot of other cases, we really push for that. In China, we've reduced the number of expats we have because we have good Chinese who are growing through the ranks, and we do not want them to have a feeling of there is a glass ceiling here. Every time there is a good job, there is a Belgian arriving. No, not at all. But we are not only sending Belgian expats, we are sending Chinese to other countries. We had a Brazilian running our Indonesian business, things like that. So we are sending people all across the world because at a certain moment we believe that in that case, for that person and for that business, there is a win-win. And then it's worth to do it. But it can't be a kind of automatic pilot thing.
Yeah, and perhaps let me add on this one. We also started, we saw it as a jump start. Yeah, we said like, okay, we sent our expatriates there. We bought new businesses. We want to get to know the businesses fast. And in financial sector, it's very important also that everything goes according to the rules. So in fact, there was also some kind of control function. I think we are now at the stage that we would not necessarily need expats anymore because there is trust, there is good cooperation, etc. But in fact, what is interesting, we get also a lot of pressure now from really our high potentials in the organization that they want to continue with the system. And to be honest, we also see that it gives us an advantage as an employer to be able to offer these careers because in fact we can make a difference also in Belgium because we can send people to Hungary, we can send them to Bulgaria, etc. But it's also the other way around because I hear a little bit in your question, apparently it's always the mother company that sends out the expatriates. This is not the case anymore. We really make sure that we have a lot of Hungarians coming over because in fact we know in the meantime that they can teach us as much as we can teach them. But it gives us really an advantage with regard to employer branding, which we do not want to give up anymore.
Okay. Satisfied? Yeah? Okay. Another question? Yep. Go ahead.
Good evening, Nathan Vervaken, now currently in the MGM program here in Ghent. Do you think that it is the responsibility of the expats or your employee to recreate their own way back tickets or their own way out? It's a bit of a follow-up to the question of my neighbor here.
I think assertiveness is important, yeah, but and I think it's not only for expatriates, yeah. As I said before, in KBC we really try to push people to take their careers into their hands. We try to abandon a little bit the paternalistic style, like we do it for you. So in fact, I think we welcome people who ask us for career opportunities in foreign countries. But will they be on their own? No, they won't, because in fact, I think we still think that if somebody has the intention to go abroad, that we should give also some support.
Can I just build on what
Please.
Anette said? Always make sure that you keep the initiative in the development of your career. It's your career. But it's good, and that's what companies will look for, of course, is to find a partnership and to look for a win-win. But I would say never lose control yourself over your own destiny.
Mm-hmm. There's another question. Yep.
My question is a little bit linked with your remark in the sense that there's a critical moment when people are coming back. Often they have to come back, and then as a company you have to see that there's a kind of next job opportunity. In a lot of cases that this is not the case. How do you deal with this? Because at that moment it's critical to lose people or to keep them.
Thank you. The right to come back. What do you do
Career
with it?
planning is the answer. And I think, yes, there are failures there where people leave, sacrifice or invest part of their energy in building something and then don't get the return upon coming back and feel frustrated about that. I think it backfires to companies because if you have a number of cases like this, people will say, why would I go abroad? Because there will not be any opportunities. For us, and I think for most of the companies, the expatriation is such an important part of a career development concept that you have to dedicate time, energy and attention to it to make sure that you carefully plan the return. That's also why we've built in steps like career planning, which are regular discussions with the home front or with the place where you might go back. Not to promise something, because that's difficult sometimes on a number of years in advance, but to explore what the different routes are and to find opportunities together.
Yeah, I think it's critical. It's critical for expat experiences. It's also critical for all project roles that you can assign someone to. So I think that one of the keys is to make sure that you keep having contact with your employee, being either on a project, being being abroad for a while, and keep that contact alive, making sure that in the talent management processes, you at least 1 year in advance start to thinking and reintegrating your associate into the organization. It's just a matter of planning and good HR practices.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think what you have to also take into consideration is that there are times also for the expatriate that it's more appropriate than other times. We always end up in having discussions about, for example, kids still going to school in a foreign country, wanting to finish their careers in that foreign country. So in fact, we see even expatriates let important and interesting career opportunities go because in fact they give the preference to stay a little bit longer in order to accommodate their families. So I think it's all about honest communication.
Okay, thank you. I saw a hand moving.
Stijn Segers, Beobank. As HR managers, you probably look from an HR perspective. But on the other hand, how do you deal with people that go abroad and as an expat and maybe want to stay on a local basis and do not want to come back or want to stay abroad? And reversely, do you also recruit people in Belgium that have an international nationality, that are internationals? Do you do that?
And in fact, we are very open to people that want to pursue their careers in a foreign country. To be honest, I think we welcome very much that some of our expatriates also want to stay in the foreign country. So in fact, we do whatever we can to accommodate the person, which is not always easy because in fact, you have different pension schemes. And in fact, I think a lot of people, first of all, start very enthusiastically, but then they back off. Because especially, for example, when they go to Central Eastern Europe, they see that they lose some interesting terms and conditions. So it's not easy to accommodate people also on a local basis. We clearly recruit people in Belgium with other nationalities. As I said before, I think this is a very interesting a resource for companies, and I think the smarter companies make sure that they benefit, especially from the cultural differences that we have here in Belgium, and make sure that they employ people that have other backgrounds.
Any other policies at yours? Would you stimulate people to stay?
We have very specific policies for that. It happens quite regularly that people who are expatriate want to go native. They meet their partner in the other country, get married there, or for whatever reason they want to stay. As Anette is saying, there are quite some complications sometimes, and they are often linked to pension rights and things like that. So it's often important to have the flexibility to work out tailor-made solutions.
Renard?
No, really nothing to add. I think that what you're describing is happens very often, and up to us to be flexible.
Okay, that's a clear answer. Yeah, come to you. There you go.
Bart Krolls, does an Infracar construction equipment, currently one of your students for the MBA in Leuven.
I realize.
Annette alluded at a certain moment that it was a little bit challenging to figure out for the pension schemes and so on what needed to be done. I also heard that you worked prior for Oracle. Now, I imagine if you work the entire time for one company, like Bekaert, that the company will really help you to figure out all these things. But in your case, where you worked for Oracle in advance now for KBC, are there any suggestions or some things that you should say, that you would say had to be taken into account if you want to pursue an international career from a pension scheme or administration point of view?
I think you need to be aware of the issues and you need to understand the issues. And I think it's the task of your HR department to inform you correctly. Yeah, but I think it's career choices you make. I decided to pursue careers in different companies, so in fact I also have to take the consequences. Yeah, I think it was easier for me because I work in HR and I know the consequences and I could do my calculations myself, or at least knew where to ask for information. But I think it's really the employer that should help you, and if you move from one company to another one, you should put it on the table and address your issues. And as Bart said, for the local assignments, also when you change employer, you can always find tailor-made solutions.
Yeah, there was another question here. There you are.
Davy Braakmans, WWT, Waste Solutions. Question, I heard from the panel that it's often not easier to have an international experience when you have a certain level in the company already. But at the other hand, there are young people who have nothing to look after. They don't have kids, can do whatever they want, they are not married, whatever. And it's at that point it's easier to go abroad because you can go do whatever you want for 5 years. And I have in my personal environment, I have a lot of people who had that chance and didn't go to a certain company because they didn't offer an international experience from the first moment. So how can a company cope with that?
I think personally that's your challenge is excellent, and this is obviously what we're seeing in our company is that we would welcome probably have people having an international experience much earlier in their career. We are evolving into that direction, step after step, but we will do that only from a developmental standpoint, which also brings, a kind of burden from an administrative standpoint and stuff like that. So we are in that evolution, but we're not there yet. And I think that your challenge is absolutely the right one from a developmental standpoint.
And I think we try to accommodate junior careers in foreign countries by designing shorter-term assignments. So in fact, in our finance program, for example, we give people the opportunity to go to another country for 6 months, then to return to go to another country, whatever. I think this is much more the experience that the younger people are looking for, because in fact they want to have quite a lot of experience on a short time frame.
Can I put a somewhat different spin on that? We recruit quite a lot of international people locally, and that these are people, young people, who are interested to work in a different country and are recruited into that different country. But I think you have to make the distinction between these type of employees and expatriates. An expatriate costs about 3 times the price of a local employee. It all depends on from which country to which country, but that's the more cost on average. So there needs to be a win-win, and companies will always have that attitude to look at, okay, where is the win-win? How can we look at developing and reaching something together? And that's why I think you will rarely see that companies will offer opportunities for somebody who is not experienced, who just joins and immediately wants to go abroad on an expatriate package. That's going to be difficult. So it's a question of finding a win-win.
Gone is the illusion now. But I think
I think it's a fair challenge.
Fair enough.
In international experience, we tend to link it here in that debate to expatriation. That's not the same, obviously. Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
Dina de Haak, Arceus. Do you have any tips and tricks how to actually approach the locals when you are expat and there you are and you meet a lot of people who are connected with each other, but then you need to connect with them also?
Thank you. I see them smiling now. Don't know what it means.
Who's smiling?
Bernard is smiling.
It's not because I was trying to see if there were some tactics to approach local people other than smiling.
Okay.
And to be quite open.
There is one other tactic: learn the language. Don't arrive in a foreign country without speaking the language. I started to work in Brazil and I spoke Portuguese from the first day, and I got completely lost every day, all the time, for a few months. And I returned home with a headache. But I thought it's important. It's a sign of respect. It's a sign of wanting to connect and wanting to make the step. And what you see is that if you make the first step, that people will make the next step.
Mm-hmm. Do you have this also as a policy? Because many of your people are in China. That ain't
in
the
China,
most
it's
easy.
much more difficult.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But would you give them kind of a kit of at least a couple of words?
We give them Chinese lessons, and we encourage them to try at least to be able to connect socially.
Yeah.
But business-wise, it's much more difficult.
Much more difficult. Yeah. Any policies at Coca-Cola?
Yeah. We offer. There is no requirement to speak local language. In an American company, it's possible to go abroad and not speaking. So that will not be an obstacle to integration. Usually,
as long as you speak English.
As long as you speak English, absolutely. Yeah, that would be the absolute requirement, I would say. But we do offer also language courses for people who are working abroad, being expats or not expats.
Okay. Ladies and gents, time is moving. Time for our last question. There we go.
There's a lot of wind tonight.
Hi again. I would like to have the experience you had the first day as an expat. Maybe the first time of every one of you, like first impressions, what happened, how you connected with the people, interactions, etc. What was a bit the story?
I think the first impressions are always good, because in fact you are quite interested in what's going on and you just observe, etc. I think the more nasty experience come when you stay a little bit longer and when you see that there are differences. If I have to talk about the most nasty experience that I ever had was when one of the VPs at Oracle said, like, take the German lady away, because in fact she's so German and she was really following the rules, and in Belgium we don't do that. That I found quite shocking, but I must say you also learn to live with this one. And to be honest, what I think is important is that you observe and that you do not try to copy paste what you've seen in your own country to the other country, because each country is different. And it's you coming to the other country. So in fact, I think it's all about also learning about what is going on in the other country. And it's not you imposing something on the country.
I think it's important to recognize the differences and the cultural differences and to express them. you know, there are some cultures where you know the communication style is not that direct, or they speaking, you know, in a even if you understand what they're saying, you do not get to the substance of it. Don't hesitate to say, well, could you please translate this for a poor Belgian that I am? So you put a little bit of humor in it, and it's working perfectly. I have no remembrance of my first experience working abroad as being, you know, something like a shock or something. But once again, it was in the Netherlands, so it was not that complicated. I had seen enough of these people in the Ardennes during the holidays.
Bart.
As I mentioned earlier, my experience is make sure you make the first step towards people. And you will see that they are really welcoming you, and that they are really very open if you make that first step. I've seen people arriving with an arrogant demeanor about, here I am and I know everything better, and in my country we do this like this and that. I can tell you it doesn't work. But if you have the humility to go towards the people and to open up, my experience is that it works perfectly well.
Okay. Let me just share one story on this. I lived a year in the US. Sometimes it's indeed being humble for the most stupid things. I had a discussion for 3/4 of an hour with a lady of the Belgacom in the US at that very moment. She was trying to convince me that my line was working. I said, I don't even have a phone. Yeah. It took her and me 3/4 of an hour to explain to me that when you order a line, they simply open it, but they never bring you the phone like they did in the old days at ours. You simply had to go to Target Market or whatever to buy a phone. 3/4 of an hour to understand why we did not understand one another. I saying, but nobody came. She said, we sent nobody. But I said, how can the phone come in then? But the line is working, sir. I said, but I don't have a thing. What thing are you looking for? I'm looking for the phone. But sir, you have to buy this in a supermarket. That's going international, and that's very, very weird. That's yeah. Good. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for being here. You were a very enthusiastic audience. Please join me in thanking our panelists here. And then thanks for still being in Belgium. Bernard, thanks for being here. Bart, likewise. Here, the floor is yours.
Just another 20 seconds. Thank you very much, Annette. Thank you very much, Bernard. Thank you, Bart. Thank you, dear.
It's working. It's working.
Some gifts are just waiting for you before the drink. Okay, the mic. You put the mic on.
No.
Don't joke with the mic. One more point while the gifts are coming. Everything has been taped, so
can be used again.
No, actually, it was on demand of our international alumni in the 10 different chapters that we have around the world, so that they will have access to this very interesting debate that was going on. So enjoy your gift.
Oh my goodness. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let me invite everyone for a drink and a bite just outside. Thank you.